I think you had mentioned it in our pre-podcast talk, where like you said like some of the people commenting and things, do they think that life is fair? And then I said I hope not, because I hope people don't think that life is fair, because it isn't. But then possibly those people think that life is fair, except it's not fair for them, which then by default makes life no longer fair, which is a weird way to think of life. But
Well,
I
the key
have
thing
come
about
across
that-
those people.
we talked about that before the show, and the biggest element to that is if you think life is fair, but for some reason it's not fair to you, the second that you address that life is fair and you're the problem, you have to acknowledge the problem. You can't just sit there and make excuses. You've admitted that there is a problem and it's within your own hands. And if you don't fix it, now you're just bitching and moaning, and nobody's gonna have any sympathy for you. So as opposed to you stay the victim, and that life is unfair, you never have to take responsibility about it. But if you take responsibility, you turn the power back into your hands and you can control that. Although in the case that we're talking about, you playing for the Winnipeg Jets, there's only so much you can do, and the other gatekeepers and the powers that be will decide the rest.
Yeah.
Right? Completely out of your hands.
Yeah, and look, my first year I played incredibly well. My second year I didn't play very well in the East Coast League, but I played well in the American League. But for me, I was starting to derail mentally from the side of it, so I could have reached out for help way earlier, and that's probably the biggest thing. But also, was I getting to the point where I was starting to become so burnt out from it all? It's actually, I watched the Johnny Manziel documentary on the plane, and I am no way comparing myself to Johnny Manziel. But when he got to the NFL, he said he no longer wanted to play. It wasn't fun. But when he was playing in college, it was fun, the partying and all that stuff. And I definitely can empathize and understand with sometimes when the pressures and the jobs and the comments, and when you're overwhelmed and it no longer becomes fun, it's hard to get that train back on track. And for me, it wasn't the partying and the money, and because it wasn't any of that. It was just I wasn't enjoying it. I was frustrated with the call-ups and and getting sent down and all these things, and I started to drift and be what would life be like if I wasn't doing this? And then it started to be hey, that seems way more fun and way less stressful and that kind of stuff. And so then it was hard, and I never really got that train back on track. I was able to kind of keep it going forward for a little bit, and then eventually it kind of reached the tipping point where I was all right, I'm done.
And what was that tipping point? Because I was here with you back in May of 2020 when you had that tipping point. You said, I'm done, I'm retiring. So What was that tipping point?
Well, the tipping point, it was definitely when I was in Europe, and I ended up getting released from my team in Europe. And because I went to Europe, and the team I was on, I was really enjoying it. I was hoping to go to Europe and find the love again, and I did. And I was this is great. I was loving it, and I was I could play here for a couple of years and then figure out life. The team, we weren't very good. We actually went through a point where we had so many injuries. We were playing with 2.5 lines, and so we went on a losing streak, and then eventually we got back on track, won 3 games in a row, and then they released me from there. And so after that, I was okay, I'm done. And then I reached out to Joe Shawn at Michigan Tech. I was hey, if I'd love to come back to school and get my master's. If there's a position open for a goalie coach, I would love to get back. And then as soon as he got back to me, and a couple of weeks later, and he's yeah, that position's there, then I'm said, yes, done. I'm done. But that was the biggest tipping point. Because I remember I called my dad, crying in the car park, and I was Dad, I can't, I just don't want to do this anymore. It's pointless. It feels like I'm just beating a dead horse. It feels this is Sisyphus pulling the boulder up the hill, which is why I have some tattoos of that, just pushing the boulder up the hill, and you're never getting to the top, and it always falls back down. Let's do something where I'm going to enjoy pushing that boulder up the hill, because I'm enjoying the journey, and I know I had that joy when I was younger and junior in college and stuff, but then when I went to pro and they started to grow up and real life started to come at me, I just didn't have it anymore.
Did you find when you got to the bottom, you're pushing the boulder up, a little bit of adversity, you reset, you got back to the bottom, did you find that being a spot of inspiration and drive of, I'm going to do this one more time, one more kick?
Yes and no. I wanted to finish my career on a high note. Fortunately, COVID kind of stopped that, which sucked, because I signed with Cincinnati and kind of struggled my first 2 games. I really had a hard time adjusting back to the smaller ice. And I took I was off from games for a month, so that was hard. But then I started to find my stride. I was traded to Brampton, was playing really well. Brampton, we were gonna make playoffs, and I was okay, we're gonna go on a cool run here. This is gonna be a sweet way to end it. And then COVID shut it down. So that I guess I can't really say that. You're gonna have to bleep those out. But
Which part?
the COVID part.
Oh, scamdemic's over.
Yeah,
Cat's
because
out of the
I know
bag.
that. I know the algorithm like it kind of punishes you when you say that. But
We can talk about it now.
but then yeah, so that really sucked. But at the bottom, one of the things that I realized in terms of why I love coaching so much, I was playing with Michael Hauser in Cincinnati, and we were doing our goalie skate, and we're talking, and there was like some things I was seeing in Hauser's games. I was like, hey man, like why don't you try doing this or try doing that? And I ended up kind of like I was like coaching my goalie partner a little bit, and I was like, this kind of seems counterintuitive because now he's gonna play over me more, but I really enjoyed coaching his game, and like that was a little bit of a light bulb in my head that I was like, maybe I'm gonna want to get back into coaching, and I'm glad that I was able to get the opportunity at Tech to be able to get back into coaching and then start to coach younger kids and younger
Hey, more
athletes.
hockey content. It's might be old, it might be new, it might be a full episode, it might be a half episode, but you can click these boxes because who doesn't like clicking boxes?